Welcome to the Big 3 Me podcast, powered by G Media. I'm your host, Akil Patterson, and on today's episode, we have political consultant, policy wonk GOP former candidate, Catalina Byrd out of Baltimore, Maryland, who will go into all things politics. So, as always, let's get to it. Welcome back to the Big 3 Me, powered by G Media. I'm here with my friend, my sister, my former work wife, Catalina Byrd, who, like I said, she's helped get some of the first black people in the GOP ever elected to office, and worked for a Republican governor who didn't do a terrible job, but actually ended up getting ostracized from his own party through the Tea Party movement. So, Catalina, thank you for coming on, and thank you for being who you are, because I always want to show that there are different levels to us in the black community.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, I guess the first thing, talk about your earlier work, especially being a black woman out of Baltimore, and literally the lineage and history that you bring to not only a political world, but kind of a world of economics too. Like this is deep rooted in you as a person.
Yeah, so I'm third generation Republican, and so I don't even think it dawned on me until I'm probably about high school that black people weren't Republican, or that the idea made you like a unicorn of some sort. Because it was all I knew. And I grew up in a house where, Dr. King was a Republican and Harriet Tubman was a Republican and Lincoln freed the slaves. So I thought it was a no-brainer. And apparently I was wrong. And so my freshman year of high school, my dad was running for mayor. And it was two things I realized. A, black and Republican is a unicorn status, but also because we don't teach civics in school, I was the only ninth grader, excited about town halls and forums and talking about this mayoral race in 1995, and nobody else was. And I was kind of like, well, what are you all paying attention to? If not this, it's like, this is important. The next mayor is going to be the mayor when we graduate high school and have a say in what kind of city we inherit, what kind of jobs are available to us. And so that was just a really eye-opening experience for me. And then also when I decided that I too wanted to one day run for mayor, and as you know, I did twice.
Yeah. I always err on the side of caution, but feel free to share as much or as little that you want. Tell us about some of the reasons why you not only ran for mayor, but the trauma, and again, I don't want to re-traumatize you or anything, but just the trauma that you had to deal with in your own personal life that made you see that there was something inherently broken with the system at play.
Well, when you've traveled other places and you've been other places, you realize that all of these other people have a lived experience with a two-party system, right? So very rarely will you go somewhere and everybody in city government belongs to the same party. It doesn't happen. You'll have one or two Republicans, maybe an independent, but exclusively has the Democratic Party controlled Baltimore since 1967, right? And so when you hear people talk about the issues of a community and why they haven't changed, I don't understand why that in and of itself is not a big red flag for people, that these people will argue with each other, tear each other down during primaries, and then as soon as the primaries are over, coalesce against whatever the non-democratic candidate is. And so, everything from school funding, the police budget, the opportunities that we have for youth, rec centers, after school programs, summer programming, athletic programming, things that are obviously working in other places we don't have here. And the answer is always, we don't have the money, but you all control the money. And so where did the money go? And, and then every couple of years, we're either getting audited by the feds and being made to return money that was given for one thing and not used properly. We're sending somebody to federal prison for embezzlement of money. I mean, It's a never ending like funnel of money going to the wrong place, and nobody ever thinks that any of this has to do with the fact that there is no checks and balances because we've let one party rule for over 50 years.
So, Catalina, I think my audience needs to know about why you and I both laugh so hard about the embezzlement and this book scandal. And will you just let the folks know about Healthy Holly and why you collected all the series?
Initially, I was gifted the series, right, for my daughter. And at the time, we didn't know in 2015, 2016 that these books were part of a much larger and broader money funneling scheme that then my former mayor, it comes out once she's elected, and I didn't run in 2016. And it turns out, that these hundreds of thousands of dollars have been paid for these books for them to go into the school system, and they never made it there. And I mean, it was just it was like pulling a thread on a shirt, and then the whole damn thing unraveled. And it was like, oh, this is blatant. Nobody is to not know that these things have occurred. And everybody's okay with it. And it's just like, but the sad part of it also is that even when you look at Black politicians inside the Democratic Party in Maryland, the ones that end up getting held accountable are always the lowest on the totem pole in the grand scheme of how the entire thing was orchestrated. And so the white people never serve time, their names get left out and redacted, and we're left to believe that only the Black person is culpable in this entire thing. And we know that not to be the case. So former Mayor Pugh is home now.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, and I saw her recently, and she told me that she wrote a play while she was inside, and she's going to start casting for the play. And I'm excited and interested in seeing where that goes.
I'm interested in. So now I have to reach out to the former. Does she still have the same number?
No.
Okay. I'm sorry. I love the way you said no. So okay, we'll talk offline. She is not giving that out, I'm sure. So all right, so let's get back to you. I remember early on, you and I had had a conversation, and we talked about how the political system was vehemently against anyone who thought differently. Like how the Democratic system or the Republican system, depending on what state you're in, how these machines kind of just roll through. They steamroll. And that has brought on the era of what we've seen from the past administration. And why the country is so divided right now is because these political machines have now decided that they're going to play political games with human lives.
And I think both parties are in the middle of their own civil war, right? You've got the uber progressives that are pushing the Democratic Party even further left than it's ever been. And so their establishment is kind of a generational war inside of there. And inside of my party, with the emergence of the Tea Party in 2010, the Tea Party is what starts us and gets us to the former president and gets us Trump. And so I really blame the Democrats, to be honest. Like, I know what we need to do inside of our party, but they wouldn't have been able to pick up this much steam to have elected a Donald Trump if they had not run so far away from Barack Obama in his first term. But if you think about the midterms in 2010, you had Southern Democrats who asked him not to come help stump for them, who were concerned about their base. And so they never had the majority again in the House while he was president. And it just, nobody's willing to come to the middle. You got demonized for being willing to work across party lines and reach over the aisle. Things that used to be considered the qualities and the characteristics of a good statesman became reasons to take shots at people and destroy whole careers. And I mean, it's just disheartening because in the process, the legislation that we're passing isn't really helping people. It's leaving more people victim to what was supposed to be getting fixed by the legislation in the first place. And and everybody's mad with everybody inside of each other's party, across both parties. And then that's how apathy happens, and how we get so many people that leave the process, that stop believing in voting, that stop believing in supporting candidates or even running themselves to be a candidate. And it's just an opportunity that we could have taken course corrective action 12 years ago, and we still haven't. And I don't see the leaders in the room right now doing anything to take any course corrective action now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point now where, I left the Republican Party in 2011, I think, 2010, 2011. You can check my voter registration. And then I ran as a Democrat. And then but even then I was like, Jesus, does everybody just backstab everybody? Like, yes. It's literally just constantly. And it was funny because one of our mutual friends said, yeah, Akil, you messed up. You did X, Y, and Z. And I was like, well, what does that mean? I had no idea that, I had done something, terrible to someone else in their eyes, when I just simply said I found a cost-effective way to get more flyers out.
Right.
But in the world of politics, I fucked up.
You didn't use the right printer. You didn't use, because, politics is an economic machine. At least it used to be, to a degree. Now, the progressives and we need the money out of politics people, they don't understand that, right? I remember in 2014 working on a race for governor for a Democrat, and the biggest battle that we were having was whether or not to pay poll workers and pay for canvassers. And it's something that historically had been done here. And people looked forward to it, like how you look forward to your seasonal job at the Gap during Christmas season. Every 18 months is this opportunity to make some money, whether you plan to vote for the candidate or not, put the shirt on, knock on some doors, drop some lit, and be at the polls on election day. And, and the campaign feeds you and gives you snacks and keeps you in water. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing dishonest about that. But we've been made to believe that it is, right? So, if everybody's not 100% true, supporter willing to go into the fire for you, then they're not worthy of working for you, or they're not worthy of being compensated for their sweat equity and their time. And that's just stupid to me, to be perfectly honest. You want people to show up. Nobody likes working the polls unless you're crazy like me and you. And it's like our Super Bowl where you really enjoy election day. Nobody wants to be out there at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. You have to pay them to make sure that they show up.
Yeah. Or to sit out in the sun during they're in the middle of July now. Right. So that's a good thing. Congratulations on that victory. You got them at least to move the damn thing closer to election day instead of, we had it, May or something?
It was in June, and because they extended the filing deadline, they extended the date of the primary. But all of this is still very kind of new in Maryland. Our primaries used to be in September, right? And and then you had from September to November, you had 60 days to run against the other person. I really don't like these primaries being this early. I think people forget about the general because they're so used to seeing Democrats win that they think it's over after the primary. And so, and I'm very, very concerned when these numbers come out after next Tuesday and what the turnout is going to look like, right? Because the middle of July, people are on vacation. Gas prices are high, but if you look at all the data that's coming out of AAA and some other states, people are still traveling. They're complaining about the gas prices, but they're still going to the beach. They're still going to King's Dominion, Busch Gardens. So what does that look like that we're having a primary in July, which we've never had? We had low turnout when we moved it to June. People were still getting used to that. And it's the middle of the freaking summer. And there's so many damn people running that no one is excited at all.
Yeah, I saw that in the state of Maryland. I saw that there's a bunch of people running. But, let's go back to you helping elect the first African-American statewide elected official in the state of Maryland when you were in the Ehrlich, Michael Steele administration. For anyone who doesn't know, Governor Robert Ehrlich was the governor, and Michael Steele was the lieutenant governor, and he goes on to be chairman of the GOP later on.
Yeah, they. So I'd known Bob and Kendall from my dad being part of the party and just growing up in the Central Committee, and it was a perfect storm, kind of like how Obama was elected in 2008. The Democrats didn't like their own candidate, and that was Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. She was the former lieutenant governor under Paris Glendening. You heard the name Kennedy, she's a Kennedy. They thought that was going to carry. And then for whatever reason, because it was no evidence that she needed a crossover vote, she picked the independent as her running mate. So you had this candidate that the party didn't like, who picked this very odd, out of left field running mate, and we won. And we were really proud of it. And at that time, it still hadn't gotten ugly enough in 2003, right? That working across party lines automatically disqualified you. We had Democrats for Ehrlich offices in Prince George's County and Baltimore City and Baltimore County. We had normal Democratic, stakeholders bearing the flag for this Republican governor. And we fared well for it. And unfortunately, Bob was only a one-term governor because, as you know, our former mayor, Martin O'Malley, then comes back and runs. And the rest is a consent decree in the making.
So for those who are unfamiliar with Martin O'Malley, actually, that might be the one thing you can go back and watch The Wire, and it might be true. The little white dude is supposed to be the epitome of Martin O'Malley, although he does look more like a current councilman who happens to be my friend. But we'll say that for another day.
So you mean the guy that's going to be my mayor in 18 months?
Listen, I'm gonna keep writing my notes, but you get it, and then from there, look, and I know when I told you as soon as you and I are done recording, we're going to interview our friend Dee Watkins who made that show. We own this city, which most people, I'm out in Portland now, and people are going, did that really happen? I go, yeah, it's crazy that this is what really happens in governments, and it's not a Democrat or a Republican thing. It's just a corruption thing. It's about corruption, and it happens in almost every major city that is controlled by effectively one party unchecked.
That's it. They control the money. They control, the access to resources. They can get people to intentionally mess up your mailing, your shirts, any number of things, intentionally leaving an authority line off something so you turn around and you get fined for not having what you need to have in your lit and things like that. And so Dee wrote episode 3 of We Own the City. And very early in my career, out of high school, I thought I wanted to go to law school. I worked at the public defender's office. And, that episode particularly, a lot of my former colleagues were just happy to hear Michael Fry's, the particular officer's name actually called. It was well known inside of the courthouse and OPD's office that, cases that were brought where he was involved in any way were likely to automatically have issues because of his lack of integrity. And so I just got out of Twitter jail, ironically, for arguing with David Simon over that show. For us here, it's still very, very raw what happened to Sean Suiter, and there is no one consensus on whether it was suicide or whether or not it was homicide, like the ME says. And so for David to lean into the suicide aspect of it and cite one of 2 independent reports and not make clear that there are 2 independent reports felt really disingenuous and disrespectful. I mean, you know me, I'm a widow. So I'm thinking about his kids. I'm thinking about his wife that are going to see this in these other states that they live in now and hear people talking about it and have to, answer to that. And that's not even what they believe to be their truth.
And what one of the things that disgusts me about that whole situation is they locked down an entire community Number one, they locked it down like, oh, there's a homicide, and we know firsthand that they were jacking up kids on the corner. They were asking questions that were just willfully inappropriate because they were going to catch this killer. And it's like, oh, he committed suicide. I'm like, I still don't believe this. I still don't believe a detective goes to a crime scene and then commits suicide. Like,
and the Park community was under siege. The ACLU press, nobody was allowed to come beyond this barricade, and that we had this very vague description of a black male in a black jacket with a white stripe on it, and that was all.
Raiders jacket.
So that was just that was the excuse in the probable cause to stop any and everyone. There was no age, there was no height. It was just black male in a black jacket with a white stripe. And people couldn't come and go to work like they needed to. It was just, it was handled incorrectly from the jump. And I think that in part, that's why there's so many gaps in the evidence, because for a week, we didn't really look anywhere but in the same 2-block radius unnecessarily, right? And it was unfortunate all the way around, and there are people who are still, trying to right the wrongs of that. But I just think for the purposes of making art, David more licensed and been more sensitive to the people who actually lived it. Which, by the way, the Harlem Park siege and all that is not in the show. Unity Bowl, not in the show. None of the things that were done post 2016 in the uprising to try to heal the city and the good that the community did, none of it makes it there.
Yeah. It's more like the media owns the narrative, and then they control the narrative, and then they decide what can and can't be released to the public. And for me, again, working in this industry now in this field, I feel as though that's kind of disingenuous, because the people, because I'm people focused, is like, well, the people are now suffering, because you don't think about everyone that's, hey, we made all this money. It's like, that's great. But all the people who are left behind, it's like it's literally like Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins gets this great national recognition. But, something that I learned from living in Baltimore is, no, Johns Hopkins is where you go to die.
Right.
You don't know if I want to go there.
People should read Antero's book, The Ghost of Johns Hopkins, And I think one of the things is, I read an article about the creator of the Montessori curriculum and how, that curriculum was really intended for disadvantaged people, and how over time it's now become this elite private school that the people intended for the curriculum are locked out of. And Johns Hopkins, in a lot of ways, is that. Johns Hopkins, the man, was a Quaker who didn't believe in owning slaves, and, came to Baltimore to work for an uncle, and saw that Black people weren't getting adequate health care, and trying to address that. And for that to now have been evolved into an institution that's known for historically experimenting on Black people, on stealing our genetic coding for testing without our permissions, Henrietta Lacks, that's not what his vision was. And now they own 3/4 of the city almost, right? They just got legislation to give them their own private police department, and they make up all of this money, and they are untaxed, right? So that was the big thing when I was running both times. If you say you're going to tax Johns Hopkins, you can go ahead and say you lost the election then, right? It's unheard of. Oh, no. They're the biggest employer in Baltimore. And tax Johns Hopkins, they'll leave. And I'm like, really?
Where are they going to go?
Where are they going? Where are they going? They're not
going nowhere.
Exactly. They can't even afford to go anywhere. But that people have heard it enough times that they become to believe it. And now they're this giant that gets to do whatever they want, build where they want, operate where they want, and now have their own special police department.
Yeah, but this is almost like the Disney situation where people are always like, and I totally do not agree with Ron DeSantis and his "Don't Say Gay" bill, but I was like, but you know what? Ron DeSantis proved a very good point. Disney didn't pack up and move their theme park because they lost their special police unit. They couldn't. It's not cost efficient.
Right.
The Hopkins isn't going to pack up and move their entire hospital to the county because the county can't support that.
They have a hospital. They have a university with campuses. They own multiple real estate endeavors. They are partners in lots of the development that goes on in and around, all the way down to the infrastructure and creating new streets and cutting off old ones. Where are they going?
Yeah,
They have no.
So you got no home, bitch. Sit down. Like you stop.
No, it's funny because it's not funny, but I say that in the irony sense is that a number of people in my generation, and I, turned 41 in March. I'm already getting senior citizen brain. A lot of my friends that were born there in between the ages of 25 to now have had unexplainable illnesses that resulted in their death. So we know Baltimore has lead, but there's also a belief that there's something that happens in an experimentation phase when you're even born there. And we might not even be living and breathing when that gets uncovered. But it's people who have been born there that have just very, very strange, undetectable, not genetically hereditary, phenomena that happen. And Dee's from East Baltimore. So when you talk to Dee, he can tell you more about it. But yeah, it's odd. It's very odd.
Well, Catalina, I want to thank you for coming on today to the podcast of The Big Three and Me. You not only shine light on some issues, but you also bring some historical context. And again, for being one of the first Black women to help get a Black man elected to statewide office for the first time in a state that has been controlled by the Democratic Party for at least 60 years. I thank you.
So weird, the tables are turned. You're the interviewer and the host now, and I'm the guest.
Yeah. You listen. Well, when you retired, somebody had to pick up the mantle.
I appreciate that because we need honest voices in media, asking the right questions, talking to the right people. And so I'm glad to see this evolution for you, and I am excited to see what you do with it next. I'm really, really proud.
Well, thank you, sis, and I love you back. And remember, send me all your Republican friends. I will talk to all of them because we are an open platform here at Gokhshtein Media, over here at G Media, because we believe the truth is somewhere in the conversation.
Absolutely.
So with that, everyone, thank you for joining us here today on the Big 3 podcast powered by G Media. Have a great day and an even better tomorrow.